In this video, we're going to be talking about square numbers and finding the square root of numbers. So let's take a look at a few examples. This question is saying find the square of 3. So what that means is take the number 3 as our base, and what we're going to do is square it. So that means we're going to put an exponent or a number up here. And if we're squaring it, that means this number up here is going to be a 2. And what this is telling us is to do 3, our base, multiplied by itself 2 times. So 3 squared is the same as 3 times 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. Find the square of 5. That means we're going to put an exponent of 2 for our base of 5. 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. We don't have to be working with just integers here. We could work with any numbers. So you can see this number here is a decimal number. We can still square it. So 3.7 squared is 3.7 times 3.7. And you can do the multiplication by hand, or you can use a calculator. If you do decide to do this on your calculator, you don't have to type in 3.7 times 3.7. There should be a button that allows you to square whichever number you input. And when I do this calculation, I end up with 13.69 as my answer. Now, we were specifically talking about finding the squares of numbers, but you could find the cube of a number. And all that means is your exponent is now a 3. So if we were to find 3 cubed, that means our base is the 3, and our exponent is a 3. And this means 3 times 3 times 3, which would be 27. If we were to find the cube of 5, it would look like this. Base of 5, exponent of 3. 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. And we can have any number as an exponent. It's just if the number is 2, we say we're squaring our base. If the number is 3, we're saying we're cubing our base. So let's just say we had 3 as our base and 4 as our exponent. We would say this is 3 to the power of 4, which is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, or 81. Now let's go ahead and take the square root of a number. This is the opposite process of squaring a number. So if you'll recall, our first problem that we had on the previous slide was 3 squared. So we said that is 3 times 3, or 9. So now we want to go the opposite way. So the square root of the number 9 should be 3. And let's take a look at how we do this. There's a few symbols we need to use to figure out square roots. So we have the symbol called the radical sign. It looks like this, and it has a bar over it. And now we call this the radicand. And then there's also a number called the index. And you don't actually see it, but it's right here. And that's telling us to take the square root. We generally don't show that if the number is 2, just because it's the most common, but you could put any number that you wanted here. So the way you figure this out is you think of, how can I make 9 by multiplying together different numbers? And we'll get into this more in later videos. We know that 9 is 3 times 3. So if you're going to take the square root of a number, what you need to do is you need to take out numbers 2 at a time. So we have 2 3's. We can pull those 3's out from underneath the radical. And we don't have anything left underneath the radical. So the square root of 9 is 3. Let's take the square root of 36. I know that 36 is 6 times 6. So we're going to take out numbers 2 at a time. So the square root of 36 is 6. Now you might have looked at this and said, well, 36 could also be 2 times 18, which is true. And then you don't have two of the same numbers. So you could say, well, it's 2 times 2 times 9. Or it's 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And now you'll see we have 2 2's and we have 2 3's. So we can pull 2's out and we can pull 3's out. So we get 2 times 3 is equal to 6. So either way you think of it, you see you get the same answer. Now, oftentimes you're going to be asked to figure out the square root of a number that's not quite so easy to break up like this into two numbers that you're multiplying together. And if that's the case, you can go ahead and use a calculator to figure this out. In your calculator, you should have a symbol that looks something like this. And depending on the version of your calculator, you either type in the symbol and then the number, or sometimes you have to type in the number first and then this symbol. It depends on what calculator you have. When I do this in my calculator, I end up with 2.3 as my answer. And you can check that this is the correct answer because if I did 2.3 squared, or 2.3 times 2.3, I should end up with the number I started with. One final note before we're done with this topic. We're specifically talking about square roots, but you could be talking about any root. So let's just take a look at a cubed root. So if we have the number 8, what this is telling us is to pull out numbers 3 at a time. So 8 is the same thing as 2 times 2 times 2. You'll see I have 1, 2, 3 2's. So I can pull out 3 2's from underneath the radical, and the cubed root of 8 is 2.